Chapter 9. Do not, said Metrodorus to Theon, take me as the best sample of the pupils of Epicurus. We are not all so hot-brained and hot-tongued. Nay, returned his companion, I am too young in philosophy to blame your warmth. In your place, I should have been as hot myself. I am glad to hear it. I like you the better for the sentiment. But the sun scorches dreadfully, let us seek shelter. They turned into a thicket, and proceeding some way, caught on the still air the notes of a flute. They advanced, and came to a beautiful bank of verdure, bordered by the river, and shadowed by a group of thick and wide-spreading oaks. It is Leontium, said Metrodorus. No other in Attica can breathe a flute so sweetly. They turned one of the trunks, and found her lying on the turf, her shoulder leaning against a tree, and her figure raised on one elbow. Beside her was seated the black-eyed girl whom Theon had before seen, her taper fingers twining into a wreath the scented flowers, which were lightly thrown into her lap by the gay sovereign, who stood at some distance among the shrubs. Enough, enough, said the gentle voice of the girl, as the youth shook down in showers the leaves and nectareous odors of the overripe blossoms. Enough, enough. Stay thy hand, thou heedless ravager. Thank thee for thy words, although they chide me, said the boy, letting go the bough which he had just seized, with a bound, light as that of the shrub when it sprung upward from his hand. Thou hast but one feeling in thy soul, Boidian, and thy nature belies the sunny clime which saw its birth. Friendship is all to thee, and that friendship is but for one. In truth, thou repayest his cares but coldly, said Leontium, taking the pipe from her mouth, and smiling on the dark-haired maiden. But I repay not thine coldly, said Boidian, kissing the hand of her friend. I am well punished for the neglect of my morning's lecture, said Sophron, impatiently, as he snatched his book from the ground, and turned away. Part not in anger, brother, exclaimed Boidian. But the youth had vanished, and in his place Metrodorus and Theon stood before her. The startled girl was about to rise, when Leontium, laying her hand on her arm, rest thee, thou timid fawn, and the maiden resumed her seat. I rejoice, said Theon, as he placed himself with Metrodorus by the side of Leontium, and took up the pipe which had fallen from her hand. I rejoice to find this little instrument restored to Athens. Say not restored to Athens, returned Leontium, only admitted into the garden. I doubt our vain youth still remember the curse of Alcibiades, and looking in their mirror, vow that none but fools would play on it. This recalls to me, said Theon, that I have heard among the various reports concerning the gardens current in the mouths of the Athenians, very contradictory ones as to the place allowed in it to the sciences and liberal arts, and to music in particular. I suppose, said Metrodorus, that you heard our whole employment was eating, drinking, and rioting in all licentiousness. True, I did hear so, and I fear I must confess, half believed it. But I also heard your licentiousness described in various ways, sometimes as grossly sensual, enlivened by no elegances of art, veiled, adorned, if I may use the expression, by no refinement. In short, that Epicurus laughed as well at the fine arts as the grave sciences. From others, again, I learned that music, dancing, poetry, and painting, were pressed into the service of his philosophy, that Leontium strung the lyre, Metrodorus the harp, Heda moved in the dance, Boidian raised the song to Venus, that his halls were covered with voluptuous pictures, the walks of his garden lined with indecent statues. And you may now perceive the truth, replied Metrodorus, with your own eyes and ears. But, said Leontium, the young Corinthian may be curious to know the sentiments of our master, and his advice regarding the pursuit of the sciences and the liberal arts. I can readily perceive, addressing herself to Theon, the origin of the two contradictory reports you have just mentioned. The first you would hear from the followers of Aristippus, who, though not acknowledging the name, follow the tenets of his philosophy, and have long been very numerous in our degenerate city. These, because Epicurus recommends but a moderate culture of those arts, which by them are too often made the elegant incentives to licentious pleasure, accuse him of neglecting them altogether. The Cynics, and other austere sects, who condemn all that ministers to the luxury, ease, or recreation of man, exaggerate his moderate use of these arts into a vicious encouragement of voluptuousness and effeminacy. You will perceive, therefore, that between the two reports lies the truth. Every innocent recreation is permitted in the garden. It is not poetry, but licentious poetry, that Epicurus condemns, not music, but voluptuous music, not painting, but licentious pictures, not dancing, but loose gestures. Yet thus he displeases alike the profligate and the austere, for these he is too moderate, and for those too severe. With regard to the sciences, if it be said, that they are neglected among us, I do not say that our master, though himself versed in them, as in all other branches of knowledge, greatly recommends them to our study, but that they are not unknown. Let Polynus be evidence. He, one of the most amiable men of our school, and one most highly favored by our master, you must have heard mentioned throughout Greece as a profound geometrician. Yes, replied Theon, but I have also heard, that since entering the garden, he has ceased to respect his science. I am not aware of that, said Leontium, though I believe he no longer devotes to it all his time, and all his faculties. Epicurus called him from his diagrams, to open to him the secrets of physics, and the beauties of ethics, to show him the springs of human action, and lead him to the study of the human mind. He taught him, that any single study, however useful and noble in itself, was yet unworthy the entire employ of a curious and powerful intellect, that the man who pursued one line of knowledge, to the exclusion of others, though he should follow it up to its very head, would never be either learned or wise, that he who pursues knowledge, should think no branch of it unworthy attention, least of all, should he confine it to those which are unconnected with the business, and add nothing to the pleasures of life, that further not our acquaintance with ourselves, nor our fellows, that tend not to enlarge the sphere of our affections, to multiply our ideas and sensations, nor extend the scope of our inquiries. On this ground, he blamed the devotion of Polynus to a science that leads to other truths than those of virtue, to other study than that of man. I am obliged to you for the explanation, said Theon, not because I could any longer have given credit to the absurd reports of your master's enemies, but because, whatever opens to me the character and opinions of such a man, interests and improves me. You will find this, said Metrodorus, the more you consider them. The life of Epicurus is a lesson of wisdom. It is by example, even more than precept, that he guides his disciples. Without issuing commands, he rules despotically. His wishes are divined, and obeyed as laws, his opinions are repeated as oracles, his doctrines adopted as demonstrated truths. All is unanimity in the garden. We are a family of brothers, of which Epicurus is the father. And I say not this in praise of the scholars, but the master. Many of us have had bad habits, many of us evil propensities, many of us violent passions. That our habits are corrected, our propensities changed, our passions restrained, lies all with Epicurus. What I myself owe him, none but myself know. The giddy follower of licentious pleasure, the headstrong victim of my passions, he has made me taste of the sweets of innocence, and brought me into the calm of philosophy. It is thus, by rendering us happy, that he lays us at his feet, thus that he gains, and holds the empire of our minds, thus that by proving himself our friend, he secures our respect, our submission, and our love. He cannot but know his power, yet he exerts it in no other way than to mend our lives, or to keep them innocent. In argument, as you may have observed, he always seeks to convince rather than sway. He is as free from arrogance as from duplicity. He would neither force an opinion on the mind, nor conceal from it a truth. Ask his advice, and it is ever ready, his opinion, and he gives it clearly. Free from prejudice himself, he is tender to that of others, yet no fear of censure, or desire of popularity, ever leads him to humor it, either in his lessons or his writings. Candor, as you have already remarked, is the prominent feature of his mind, it is the crown of his perfect character. I say this, my young Corinthian, who know him. His soul, indeed, is open to all, but I have approached very near it, and considered its innermost recesses. Yes, I am proud to say it, I am one of those he has drawn most closely into his intimacy. With all my imperfections and errors, he has adopted me as a son, and, inferior as I am in years, wisdom and virtue, he deigns to call me his friend. Tears here filled the eyes of the scholar. He seemed about to resume, when a slight sound made the party turn their heads, and they saw the master at their side. "Do not rise, my children, I will seat myself among you." Theon perceived he had heard the closing sentence of Metrodorus, for the water glistened in his eyes as he fixed them tenderly upon him. "Thanks, my son, for this tribute of thy gratitude. I have heard thy eulogy, and I accept it joyfully. Let all men," and he turned his eye upon Theon, "be above flattery, but let not a sage be above praise. He that is so is either arrogant or insincere. For myself, I own that the commendations of my friends fills me with triumph, as the assurance of their affection does with satisfaction. The approbation of our familiars, who are with us in our secret hours, hear our private converse, know the habits of our lives, and the bent of our dispositions, is, or should be to us, far more pleasing and triumphant than the shouts of a multitude, or the worship of the world." There was a pause of some minutes, when Leontium took up the word. "I have been explaining, though very shortly and imperfectly, your views concerning the studies most proper to be pursued by men. I believe the Corinthian has some curiosity on this point." Theon assented. "Knowledge," said the master, "is the best riches that man can possess. Without it, he is a brute, with it, he is a god. But like happiness, he often pursues it without finding it, or, at best, obtains of it but an imperfect glimpse. It is not that the road to it is either dark or difficult, but that he takes a wrong one, or if he enters on the right, he does so unprepared for the journey. Now he thinks knowledge one with erudition, and shutting himself up in his closet, he cons all the lore of antiquity, he fathoms the sciences, keeps up in his memory all the sayings of the dead, and reckoning the value of his acquisitions by the measure of the time and labor he hath expended on them, he is satisfied he hath reached his end, and from his retirement, looking down upon his more ignorant, because less learned, brethren, he calls them children and barbarians. But alas! Learning is not wisdom, nor will books give understanding. Again, he takes a more inviting road, he rushes into the crowd, he rolls down the stream of pleasure, he courts the breath of popularity, he unravels or weaves the riddles of intrigue, he humors the passions of his fellows, and rises upon them to name and power. Then, laughing at the credulity, ignorance, and vice, he hath set his throne upon, he says, that to know the world is the only knowledge, and to see to dupe it, is to be wise. Yet knowledge of the world is not knowledge of man, nor to triumph in the passions of others, is not to triumph over our own. No, my sons, that only is real, is sterling knowledge, which goes to make us better and happier men, and which fits us to assist the virtue and happiness of others. All learning is useful, all the sciences are curious, all the arts are beautiful, but more useful, more curious, and more beautiful, is the perfect knowledge and perfect government of ourselves. Though a man should read the heavens, unravel their laws and their revolutions, though he should dive into the mysteries of matter, and expound the phenomena of earth and air, though he should be conversant with all the writings, and the sayings, and the actions of the dead, though he should hold the pencil of Pysius, the chisel of Polycletes, or the lyre of Pindar, though he should do one or all of these things, yet know not the secret springs of his own mind, the foundation of his opinions, the motives of his actions, if he hold not the rein over his passions, if he have not cleared the mist of all prejudices from his understanding, if he have not rubbed off all intolerance from his judgments, if he know not to weigh his own actions, and the actions of others, in the balance of justice, that man hath not knowledge, nor, though he be a man of science, a man of learning, or an artist, he is not a sage. He must yet sit down, patient, at the feet of philosophy. With all his learning, he hath yet to learn, and, perhaps, a harder task, he hath to unlearn. The master here paused, but the ears of Theon still hung upon his lips. "Do not cease," he exclaimed, "I could listen to you through eternity." "I cannot promise to declaim quite so long," returned the sage, smiling. "But if you wish it, we will follow out the topic when we have joined our other friends." They rose, and bent their steps to the public walk. Chapter 10. Epicurus stood in the midst of the expectant scholars. "My sons," he said, "why do you enter the gardens? Is it to seek happiness, or to seek virtue and knowledge? Attend, and I will show you that in finding one, you shall find the three. To be happy, we must be virtuous, and when we are virtuous, we are wise. Let us then begin, and first, let us for a while hush our passions into slumber, forget our prejudices, and cast away our vanity and our pride. Thus patient and modest, let us come to the feet of philosophy, let us say to her, behold us scholars and children, gifted by nature with faculties, affections, and passions. Teach us their use and their guidance. Show us how to turn them to account, how best to make them conduce to our ease, and minister to our enjoyment. Sons of earth, says the deity, you have spoken wisely, you feel that you are gifted by nature with faculties, affections, and passions, and you perceive that on the right exertion and direction of these depends your well-being. It does so. Your affections both of soul and body may be shortly reduced to two, pleasure and pain, the one troublesome, and the other agreeable. It is natural and befitting, therefore, that you shun pain, and desire and follow after pleasure. Set forth then on the pursuit, but ere you start, be sure that it is in the right road, and that you have your eye on the true object. Perfect pleasure, which is happiness, you will have attained when you have brought your bodies and souls into a state of satisfied tranquility. To arrive at this, much previous exertion is requisite, yet exertion, not violent, only constant and even. And first, the body, with its passions and appetites, demands gratification and indulgence. But beware! For here are the hidden rocks which may shipwreck your bark on its passage, and shut you out forever from the haven of repose. Provide yourselves then with a skilled pilot, who may steer you through the Scylla and Charybdis of your carnal affections, and point the steady helm through the deep waters of your passions. Behold her. It is Prudence, the mother of the virtues, and the handmaid of wisdom. Ask, and she will tell you, that gratification will give new edge to the hunger of your appetites, and that the storm of the passions shall kindle with indulgence. Ask, and she will tell you, that sensual pleasure is pain covered with the mask of happiness. Behold, she strips it from her face, and reveals the features of disease, disquietude, and remorse. Ask, and she will tell you, that happiness is not found in tumult, but tranquility, and that, not the tranquility of indolence and inaction, but of a healthy contentment of soul and body. Ask, and she will tell you, that a happy life is like neither to a roaring torrent, nor a stagnant pool, but to a placid and crystal stream, that flows gently and silently along. And now prudence shall bring to you the lovely train of the virtues. Temperance, throwing a bridle on your desires, shall gradually subdue and annihilate those whose present indulgence would only bring future evil, and others more necessary and more innocent, she shall yet bring down to such becoming moderation, as shall prevent all disquiet to the soul and injury to the body. Fortitude shall strengthen you to bear those diseases which even temperance may not be efficient to prevent, those afflictions which fate may level at you, those persecutions which the folly or malice of man may invent. It shall fit you to bear all things, to conquer fear, and to meet death. Justice shall give you security among your fellows, and satisfaction in your own breasts. Generosity shall endear you to others, and sweeten your own nature to yourselves. Gentleness shall take the sting from the malice of your enemies, and make you extract double sweet from the kindness of friends. Gratitude shall lighten the burden of obligation, or render it even pleasant to bear. Friendship shall put the crown on your security and your joy. With these, and yet more virtues, shall prudence surround you. And, thus attended, hold on your course in confidence, and moor your barks in the haven of repose. Thus says philosophy, my sons, and says she not wisely? Tell us, ye who have tried the slippery paths of licentiousness, who have given the rein to your passions, and sought pleasure in the lap of voluptuousness, tell us, did ye find her there? No, ye did not, or ye would not now inquire of her from Epicurus. Come, then, philosophy hath shown ye the way. Throw off your old habits, wash impurity from your hearts, take up the bridle of your passions, govern your minds, and be happy. And ye, my sons, to whom all things are yet new, whose passions yet in the bud, have never led you to pain and regret, ye who have yet to begin your career, come ye also. Philosophy hath shown ye the way. Keep your hearts innocent, hold the bridle of your passions, govern your minds, and be happy. But, my sons, methinks I hear you say, you have shown us the virtues rather as modifiers and correctors of evil, than as the givers of actual and perfect good. Happiness, you tell us, consists in ease of body and mind, yet temperance cannot secure the former from disease, nor can all the virtues united ward affliction from the latter. True, my children, philosophy cannot change the laws of nature, but she may teach us to accommodate ourselves to them. She cannot annul pain, but she can arm us to bear it. And though the evils of fate be many, and not the evils of man's coining more, nature afflicts us with disease, but for once that it is the infliction of nature, 99 times it is the consequence of our own folly. Nature levels us with death, but how mild is the death of nature, with philosophy to spread the pillow, and friendship to take the last sigh, to the protracted agonies of debauchery, subduing the body by inches, while philosophy is not there to give strength, nor friendship consolation, but while the flames of fever are heated by impatience, and the stings of pain envenomed by remorse. And tell me, my sons, when the body of the sage is stretched on the couch of pain, hath he not his mind to minister delight to him? Hath he not conscience whispering that his present evil is not chargeable to his own past folly, but to the laws of nature, which no effort or foresight of his could have prevented? Hath he not memory to bring to him past pleasures, the pleasures of a well-spent life, on which he may feed even while pain racks his members, and fever consumes his vitals? Or, what if agony overpower his frame, and cripple his faculties, is there not death at hand to reach him deliverance? Here, then is death, the giant of terror, acting as a friend. But does he interrupt our enjoyments as well as our sufferings? And is it for this we fear him? Ought we not rather to rejoice, seeing that the day of life has its bright and its clouded hours, that we are laid to sleep while the sun of joy yet shines, before the storm of fate has broken our tranquility or the evening of age bedimmed our prospect? Death, then, is never our foe. When not a friend, he cannot be worse than indifferent. For while we are, death is not, and when death is, we are not. To be wise, then, death is nothing. Examine the ills of life, are they not of our own creation, or take they not their darkest hues from our passions or our ignorance? What is poverty, if we have temperance, and can be satisfied with a crust, and a draught from the spring? If we have modesty, and can wear a woolen garment as gladly as a Tyrian robe? What is slander, if we have no vanity that it can wound, and no anger that it can kindle? What is neglect, if we have no ambition that it can disappoint, and no pride that it can mortify? What is persecution, if we have our own bosoms in which to retire, and a spot of earth to sit down and rest upon? What is death, when without superstition to clothe him with terrors, we can cover our heads, and go to sleep in his arms? What a list of human calamities are here expunged: poverty, slander, neglect, disappointment, persecution, death. What yet remains? Disease? That, too, we have shown temperance can often shun, and philosophy can always alleviate. But there is yet a pain, which the wisest and the best of men cannot escape, that all of us, my sons, have felt, or have to feel. Do not your hearts whisper it? Do you not tell me, that in death there is yet a sting? That ere he aim at us, he may level the beloved of our soul? The Father, whose tender care hath reared our infant minds, the brother, whom the same breast hath nourished, and the same roof sheltered, with whom, side by side, we have grown like two plants by a river, sucking life from the same fountain and strength from the same sun, the child whose gape rattle delights our ears, or whose opening understanding fixes our hopes, the friend of our choice, with whom we have exchanged hearts, and shared all our pains and pleasures, whose eye hath reflected the tear of sympathy, whose hand hath smoothed the couch of sickness. Ah! My sons, here indeed is a pain that cuts into the soul. There are masters that will tell you otherwise, who will tell you that it is unworthy of a man to mourn even here. But such, my sons, speak not the truth of experience or philosophy, but the subtleties of sophistry and pride. He who feels not the loss, hath never felt the possession. He who knows not the grief, hath never known the joy. See the price of a friend in the duties we render him, and the sacrifices we make to him, and which, in making, we count not sacrifices, but pleasures. We sorrow for his sorrow, we supply his wants, or, if we cannot, we share them. We follow him to exile. We close ourselves in his prison, we soothe him in sickness, we strengthen him in death, nay, if it be possible, we throw down our life for his. Oh! What a treasure is that for which we do so much! And is it forbidden to us to mourn its loss? If it be, the power is not with us to obey. Should we, then, to avoid the evil, forego the good? Shall we shut love from our hearts, that we may not feel the pain of his departure? No, happiness forbids it. Experience forbids it. Let him who hath laid on the pyre the dearest of his soul, who hath washed the urn with the bitterest tears of grief, let him say if his heart hath ever formed the wish that it had never shrined within it him whom he now deplores. Let him say if the pleasures of the sweet communion of his former days doth not still live in his remembrance. If he love not to recall the image of the departed, the tones of his voice, the words of his discourse, the deeds of his kindness. the amiable virtues of his life. If, while he weeps the loss of his friend, he smiles not to think that he once possessed him. He who knows not friendship, knows not the purest pleasure of earth. Yet if fate deprive us of it, though we grieve, we do not sink. Philosophy is still at hand, and she upholds us with fortitude. And think, my sons, perhaps in the very evil we dread, there is a good, perhaps the very uncertainty of the tenure gives it value in our eyes, perhaps all our pleasures take their zest from the known possibility of their interruption. What were the glories of the sun, if we knew not the gloom of darkness? What the refreshing breezes of morning and evening, if we felt not the fervors of noon? Should we value the lovely flower, if it bloomed eternally, or the luscious fruit, if it hung always on the bough? And not the smiles of the heavens more beautiful in contrast with their frowns, and the delights of the seasons more grateful from their vicissitudes? Let us then be slow to blame nature, for perhaps in her apparent errors there is hidden a wisdom. Let us not quarrel with fate, for perhaps in our evils lie the seeds of our good. Were our body never subject to sickness, we might be insensible to the joy of health. Were our life eternal, our tranquility might sink into inaction. Were our friendship not threatened with interruption, it might want much of its tenderness. This, then, my sons, is our duty, for this is our interest and our happiness, to seek our pleasures from the hands of the virtues, and for the pain which may befall us, to submit to it with patience, or bear up against it with fortitude. To walk, in short, through life innocently and tranquilly, and to look on death as its gentle termination, which it becomes us to meet with ready minds, neither regretting the past, nor anxious for the future. The sage had scarcely ceased, when a scholar advanced from the crowd, and bowing his head with reverence, stooped and touched the knees of his master. "Refuse not my homage," he said, "nor call the expression of it presumptuous." Epicurus raised him in his arms. "Culetes, I am more proud of the homage of thy young mind, than I should be of that of the assembled crowds of Olympia. May thy master, my son, never lose his power over it, as I feel that he will never abuse it." Chapter 11. The sun had far declined from his meridian, yet no cool breeze tempered the fervors of the heat. The air was chained in oppressive stillness, when suddenly a bustling wind shook the trees, and a low growling reverberated round the horizon. The scholars retired before the threatening storm, but Theon, his ear still filled with the musical voice of the sage, and his heart imbued with his gentle precepts, lingered to feed alone upon the thoughts they had awakened in him. "How mad is the folly of man," he said, as he threw his back against a tree. "Professing to admire wisdom and love virtue, and yet ever persecuting and slandering both. How vain is it to look for credit by teaching truth, or to seek fame by the road of virtue. Thy regret is idle, my son," said a well-known voice in his ear. "Oh, my guardian spirit!" cried the startled youth, "is it you?" "I linger," said the Gargishine, "to watch the approach of the storm, and I suppose you do the same." "No," returned the youth, "I hardly heeded the heavens. They are singular, however, at this moment." Theon looked where the sage pointed. A dark mass of vapors was piled upon the head of Hymettus, from which two columns, shooting forth like the branches of some giant oak, spread themselves over the sky. The opposing sun, fast traveling to the horizon, looked red through the heated atmosphere, and flashed a deep glare on their murky sides. Soon half the landscape was blackened with the sinking clouds, that each moment increasing in bulk and density, seemed to touch the bosom of the earth. The western half glowed with a brilliant light, like molten gold. The distant outline was marked with a pencil of fire, while the gardens and villas that speckled the plain, seemed illuminated in jubilee. "See," said the sage, stretching his hand towards the gilded scene, see the image of that fame which is not founded in virtue. Thus bright may it shine for a moment, but the cloud of oblivion or infamy comes fast to cover its glory. Is it so? Said Theon. Do not the vile of the earth fill the tongues of men, and are not the noble forgotten? Does not the titled murderer inscribe his name on the tablets of eternity, with the sword which is dipped in the blood of his fellows? And does not the man who has spent his youth, and manhood, and age, in the courts of wisdom, who has planted peace at the hearth, and given truth to the rising age, does he not go down to the grave in silence, his bones unhonored, and his name forgotten? Possibly his name, but, if he have planted peace at the hearth, and given truth to the rising age, surely not his better part, his virtues. Do not confound noise with fame. The man who is remembered, is not always honored, and reflect, what a man toils for, that probably will he win. The titled murderer, who weaves his fate with that of empires, will with them go down to posterity. The sage, who does his work in the silence of retirement, unobserved in his own generation, will pass into the silence of the grave, unknown to the future. But suppose he be known, how few worshippers should crowd to his shrine, and what millions to that of the other? And those few, my son, who are they? The wise of the earth, the enlightened patriot, the discerning philosopher. And who are the millions? The ignorant, the prejudiced, and the idle. Nor yet, let us so wrong the reason of our species, as to say, that they always give honor to the mischievous rather than the useful, gratitude to their oppressors, rather than their benefactor. In instances they may be blind, but in the gross they are just. The splendor of action, the daring of enterprise, or the glitter of majesty, may seize their imagination, and so drown their judgment, but never is it the tyranny of power, the wantonness of cruelty, the brutality of vice, which they adore, any more than it is the innocence and usefulness of virtue, which they despise. The united experience of mankind has pronounced virtue to be the great good, nay, so universal is the conviction, that even those who insult her in their practice, bow to her in their understanding. Man is for the most part more fool than knave, more weak than depraved in action, more ignorant than vicious in judgment, and seldom is he so weak and so ignorant, as not to see his own interest, and value him who promotes it. But say that he often slanders the virtuous, and persecutes the wise, he does it more in error than from depravity. He is credulous, and on the report of malice, takes virtue for hypocrisy. He is superstitious, and some of the truths of wisdom appear to him profane. Say he does homage to vice, you will find when he does it, he believes her to be virtue. Hypocrisy has masked her deformity, or talent decked her with beauty. Is here, then, subject for wrath? Rather, surely, for compassion. Is here matter for disgust? Rather, surely, for exertion. The darker the ignorance, the more praise to the sage who dispels it. The deeper the prejudice, more fame to the courage which braves it. But may the courage be vain? May the sage fall the victim of the ignorance he combats? He may, he often has. But ere he engage, knows he not the risk? The risk is to himself, the profit to mankind. To a benevolent soul, the odds is worth the throw, and though it be against him at the present, he may win it in the future. The sage, whose vision is cleared from the mists of prejudice, can stretch it over the existing age, to the kindling horizon of the succeeding, and see, perhaps, unborn generations weeping the injustice of their fathers, and worshipping those truths which they condemned. Or is it otherwise? Lives he in the old age of the world, and does he see the stream of time flowing through a soil yet more rank with prejudice and evil? Say then, were the praise of such a world a fit object of his ambition, or shall he be jealous of the fame which ignorance yields to the unworthy? But anyway, my son, It is not the voice of fame that we should seek in the practice of virtue, but the peace of self-satisfaction. The object of the sage is to make himself independent of all that he cannot command within himself. Yet, when I speak of independence, I mean not indifference. While we make ourselves sufficient for ourselves, we need not forget the crowd about us. We are not wise in the contempt of others but in calm approbation of ourselves. Still dost thou droop thy head, my son? Said the gentle philosopher, laying a hand on the shoulder of his young friend. Your words sink deep into my soul, replied Theon, yet they have not chased the melancholy they found there. I have not such a world in myself as to be independent of that about me, nor can I forgive the offences of my fellows, merely because they commit them from ignorance. Nay, is not their very ignorance often a crime, when the voice of truth is whispering in their ear? And if they do not hear her whisper in the one ear, it is because prejudice is crying aloud into the other. Prejudice. I hate prejudice, said Theon. And so do I, said the master. Yes, but I am provoked with it. I suspect that will not remove the evil. Nothing will remove it. It is inherent in men's nature. Then as we are men, it may be inherent in ours. Trust me, my son, it is better to correct ourselves, than to find fault with our neighbors. But is it not allowed to do both? Can we help seeing the errors of the world in which we live, and seeing, can we help being angry at them? Certainly not the seeing them, but I hope, very possibly, the being angry with them. He that loses temper with the folly of others, shows that he has folly himself. In which case they have as much right to complain of his, as he of theirs. And have I not been trying to show you, that when you are wise you will be independent of all that you cannot command within yourself? You say you are not so now. I admit it, but when you are wise you will be so. And till you are wise, you have surely no title to quarrel with another's ignorance. I can never be independent of my friends, returned Theon. I must ever feel the injustice done to them, though I might be regardless of that which affected merely myself. Why so? What would enable you to disregard that done to yourself? Conscious innocence. Pride, if you will. Contempt of the folly and ignorance of my judges. Well, and are you less conscious of the innocence of your friend? If you are, where is your indignation? And if you are not, have you less pride for him than for yourself? Do you respect that folly and ignorance in his judges, that you despise in your own? I believe it will not stand argument, said Theon. But you must forgive me if, when I contemplate Epicurus, I feel indignant at the slander which dares to breathe upon his purity. And do you think you were yourself an object of indignation, when you spoke of him as a monster of vice? Yes, I feel I was. But he felt otherwise, said the master, and which, think you, is likely to feel most wisely? Ah! I hope it is Epicurus, said the youth, snatching his instructor's hand. This conversation was here interrupted by the bursting of the storm. The fire flashed round the horizon, the thunder cracked over the zenith, and the first big drops fell from the burdened clouds. We are near the temple, said the sage, let us seek shelter under its portico. We may watch the storm there, without a wet skin. They had hardly gained it, when the rain poured down in torrents. Eligius, whom the burning sun had of late faded into a feeble rill, soon filled and overflowed his bed. Wave after wave, in sudden swell, came roaring down, as if he now first burst to life from the womb of his parent mountain. But the violence of the storm soon spent its strength. Already the thunder broke with longer intervals, and a faint light, like the opening of morning, gleamed over the western heavens. At length the sun cleared his barrier of clouds. He stood on the verge of the waves, and shot his level rise over the blazing salamis and the glistening earth. The sage stood with his young friend in silent admiration, when the eye of the latter was attracted by a horseman, who came full gallop over the plain, directly towards them. The object of his attention had nearly reached the river, when he perceived the rider to be a female. The swift feet of the steed now touched the opposing bank. "Great Jove, he will not attempt the passage," exclaimed the youth, as he sprung towards the river. "Stop, stop," he cried. She checked the rein, but too late. The animal, accustomed to the passage, and blinded by speed, plunged into the flood. Theon tore his robe from his shoulders, and was about to make the plunge on his side, when he was grasped by Epicurus. "Be not rash. The horse is strong, and the rider skillful." The voice that uttered these words was calm and distinct, but its wonted music was changed into the deep tone of suppressed horror. Even at that moment, the accent struck Theon's ear. "Do you know her? Is she your friend? Is she dear to you?" If so, he made another effort to throw himself forward, but was still restrained by Epicurus. He looked into the philosopher's face. There was no motion in it, save a quivering round the mouth, while the eyes were fixed in aching gaze on the struggling animal. He breasted the water midway, when seemingly frightened at the rapidity of the current, he tried to turn. The rider saw the danger, she curbed the rein, she tried with voice and effort to urge him to the conflict. Theon looked again at the sage. He saw he had loosened his mantle, and was prepared to try the flood. "I conjure you, by the gods," said the youth, "what is my life to yours?" He grasped the sage in his turn. "Let me save her. I will save her, I swear it." They both struggled a moment for the leap. "I swear," continued Theon, with furious energy, "that if you go I will follow." He made another effort, and dashed from the hold of Epicurus into the river. Naturally strong, he was doubly so at this moment. He felt not fear, he saw not danger. In a moment he was in the center of the current. Another stroke, and he had seized the mane of the steed. But the terrified animal even then gave way to the stream. The rider still struggled for her seat. But her strength fast failed, she stretched out her hand with a feeble cry of despair. Theon shot forward yet swifter than the tide. He drove with a shock against the horse, and caught with one arm the expiring girl. Then, half yielding to the current, he parted with the other the roaring waters, and with effort almost superhuman, grappled with their fury. Panting, choking, bewildered, yet never relaxing, he reached, but he knew not how, the land. When he recovered recollection, he found himself lying on a couch, in the arms of Epicurus. "Where am I?" he said, "and where is the lovely girl?" "Safe, safe, as her generous deliverer. Oh, my son! Now indeed my son, when I owe to thee my Heda." "Was it your adopted child, then?" cried the youth, with a shout of delirious joy, as he threw himself on the breast of the sage. "But tell me," he said, rising and looking round on Metrodorus, who, with two other scholars, stood beside the couch, "how came I here?" "I believe," said Metrodorus, "the master swam to your aid. At least we found him lifting you and Heda from the water. I watched your strength, my son, and reserved mine till it should fail. When I observed it do so, I came to your assistance. Now, compose yourself a while, and I will go and put myself into a dry tunic." Chapter 12. Theon, rising, recruited from the warm bath, and his limbs being well rubbed with ointments, joined the party at supper in health and spirits. It consisted of the master, Leontium, Metrodorus, and two other scholars, whose persons were new to him. There was something in the gentle manners of one, not unmixed with a little awkwardness, the grave repose of his features, the abstract thought that lined his forehead, and fixed his mild eye, that led him to guess it was Polynus. The other, whose gait had the dignity of manhood, and the polish of art, whose face, without being handsome, had that beauty which refined sentiment and a well-stored mind always throw more or less into the features, whose whole appearance showed at once the fine scholar and the amiable man, fixed instantly Theon's attention and curiosity. All received the youth with congratulations, and Metrodorus, as he held him in his embrace, jokingly upbraided him as a greedy and barbarous invader, who was carrying off, in his single person, the whole love and honor of the garden. "But yet," he added, "have a care, for I doubt you have secured the envy also." "I believe it," said Theon. "At least I know I should envy you, or any of your fraternity, who had risked his life, or lost it, in service of your master, or any your master loved." "Well said, my dear youth," said the stranger, taking his hand, "and when you have seen more of the nymph you so gallantly rescued, you will perhaps think the man a no less object of envy, who should risk his life for her, or any he loved." They moved to the table, when Leontium whispered Theon, "Hermachus of Mytilene, the bosom friend of Epicurus." "I thank you," replied Theon, "you have well read my curiosity." The party were about to place themselves when a sound in the passage turned all eyes to the door. "Yes, nurse, you may just peaceably let me take my own way. Go, go, I am quite well, quite warm, and quite active. I tell you, you have rubbed my skin off, would you rub away my flesh too?" And in came, with the light foot of a nymph of Diane, the young Heda. A white garment, carelessly adjusted, fell with inimitable grace, over her airy form, in equal negligence. Her long hair, still moist from the recent waves, and disheveled by the anxious rubbing of her careful attendant, hung down her shoulders to her own. Her face, though pale from late alarm and fatigue, beaming with life and joy. Her full dark eyes sparkling with intelligence, and her lips, though their coral was slightly faded, lovely with smiles. In one hand she held a goblet, in the other a chaplet of myrtle. "Which is my hero?" she asked in a voice more sweet than the evening zephyr, as she looked round the board. "Am I right?" Approaching Theon, the youth, as he gazed on the lovely face, forgot to answer. "Nay, is it a statue?" Leaning forward, and gazing in her turn, as if in curious inspection. "No, a slave," said Theon, half smiling, half blushing, as he stooped his knee, while she placed the garland on his head. "I come to pledge you," she said, putting the cup to her lips, "and to bid you pledge me," presenting it with bewitching grace to the youth. He took it in speechless ecstasy from her taper fingers, and turning that side to his mouth which had received the touch of hers, quaffed at once the draught of wine and love. "Beware," said a voice in his ear, "it is the cup of Circe." He turned, Polyneuce stood behind him, but when he saw his motionless features, he could hardly believe the whisper had been uttered by him. "I know," continued the fair one, pointing to the table, "there is but cold beverage here for a drowned man. My wise father may know to give comfort to the mind, but come to my good nurse, when you want the comfort of the body. She is the most skillful compounder of elixirs, philters, and every palatable medicine, that you might haply find in all Greece, all Asia, or all the earth. And now make way," putting back the surrounding company, and leading Theon by the arm to the upper end of the table. "Behold the king of the feast. That is, if you are the queen," said the intoxicated youth. "Oh, certainly," placing herself by his side, "I never refuse consequence, whenever I can get it." "Whenever you can take it, you mean," said the master, laughing. "And is not that everywhere?" said Hermachus, bowing to the fair girl. "Yes, I believe it is. A pretty face, my friends, may presume much, a willful nature may carry all things. I have both to perfection, have I not? Praise to Venus, and the Graces," said Leontium, "our sister has brought a heart as gay from the college of Pythagoras, as she took into it." "To be sure, and did you expect otherwise?" "Sure. You philosophers know nothing of human nature. I could have told you before this last experiment, that humour lies in contrast, and that a wag will find more subject in a synod of grave sages than a crew of laughing wits. You must know, turning to Theon, I have been on a visit to a wise man, a very wise man, who has followed from his youth up the whim, and all very wise men have whims, of restoring the neglected school of Pythagoras to its pristine greatness. Accordingly, he has collected and brought up some dozen submissive youths to his full satisfaction, for not one of them dare know his right hand from his left, but on his master's authority, doubly backed by that of the great founder. They have, in short, no purse of their own, no time of their own, no tongue of their own, no will of their own, and no thought of their own. You cannot conceive a more perfect community. One more virtuously insipid, more scientifically absurd, or more wisely ignorant. Fie, fie you giddy girl, said the master, smiling, while he tried to frown. Giddy, not at all. I am delivering a grave matter-of-fact story. And we are all here, said Hermachus, so pray let us have the whole of it. The whole? Nay, you have it already. An abode of the blessed, a house with 12 bodies in it, and one brain to serve them all. Why, replied Hermachus, I believe you have at home some 100 bodies in the same predicament. To be sure, and so I told the sage Pythagorean, when he looked so complacently on his 11 pieces of mechanism, and assured him that were it not for me, there would not be a single original in the garden, save the master. I assure you, father, I gave just as matter-of-fact a description of your household, as I now do of the old Pythagoreans. And, a most singular coincidence, I remember he cried, fie, fie, just as you did now. Once more, it was a most perfect household, with the men, all peace, method, virtue, learning and absurdity, with the women, all silence, order, ignorance, modesty, and stupidity. And pray, sister, said Metrodorus, what made you leave a society that afforded such rich food to your satire? Because, brother, the richest food cloys the fastest. I passed 3 days to my perfect satisfaction, a fourth would have killed me. And your friends too, said the philosopher, shaking his head. Killed them. They never knew they had life, till I found it out for them. No, no, I left sore hearts behind me. The master indeed, the master. Poor man, shall I confess it? Before I left the house, he caught one of his pupils looking into a mirror with a candle, heard that another had stirred the fire with a sword, and oh! more dreadful than all, that a third had swallowed a bean. If I could but have stayed 3 days longer, I might have wound my girdle round the necks of the whole dozen, brought them on my back, and laid them at the feet of Epicurus. And what said the master, all this time? Said Leontium. Said he? What said he? I never heard what he said, for I was reading what he felt. And what felt he? Asked Hermachus. Just what you have felt, and you too, looking at Polyneus. Aye, and you also, very sage philosopher, and turning short round to Theon, what you have to feel, if you have not yet felt, that I was vastly witty, vastly amusing, and vastly beautiful. And do you think, said the Gargician, when we feel all this, we can't be angry with you? Nay, what do you think? But no, no, I know you all better than you know yourselves. And I think you cannot, or if you can, 'tis as the poet, who curses the muse he burns to propitiate. O philosophy! Philosophy! Thou usest hard maxims and showest a grave face, yet thy maxims are but words, and thy face but a mask. A skilful histrion, who, when the buskin is off, paint, plaster, and garment thrown aside, stands no higher, no fairer, and no more mighty, than the youngest, poorest, and simplest of thy gaping worshippers. Ah, friends! laugh and frown, but show me the man, the wisest, the gravest, or the sourest, that a bright pair of eyes can't make a fool of." "Ah, you proud girl," said Hermachus, "tremble. Remember, the blue-eyed Sappho died at last for a faun. Well, if such be my fate, I must submit. I do not deny, because I have been wise hitherto, that I may not turn fool with the philosophers before I die." "What an excellent school for the rearing of youth," said the master. "The old Pythagorean must think mine. Judging from me as a specimen, you mean. And trust me now, father, I am the best. Do I not practice what you preach? What you show the way to, do I not possess? Look at my light foot, look in my laughing eye, read my gay heart, and tell, if pleasure be not mine. Confess, then, that I take a shorter cut to the goal than your wiser scholars, I than your wisest self. You study, you lecture, you argue, you exhort. And what is it all for? As if you could not be good without so much learning, and happy without so much talking. Here am I think I am very good, and I am quite sure I am very happy, yet I never wrote a treatise in my life, and can hardly listen to one without a yawn." "Theon," said Epicurus, smiling, "you see now the priestess of our midnight orgies. Ah, poor youth, you must have found the garden but a dull place in my absence. But have patience, it will be better in future." "More dangerous," said Polyneus. "Never mind him," whispered Heda, in the Corinthian's ear. "He is not the grave man that a bright pair of eyes cannot make a fool of. This is very odd," she continued, looking round the board. "Here am I, the stranger, and one too half drowned, charged with the entertaining of this whole learned society." "Nay, my girl," said the master, "thou hadst need to be whole drowned, ere your friends might secure the happiness of being listened to. Indeed, I believe it's true, and considering that the greatest pleasure of life is the being listened to, I wonder how anyone was found to pick me out of the water." The Corinthian, to be sure, did not know what he saved, but that the master should wet his tunic in my service is a very unaccountable circumstance. Is there any reason for it in philosophy? I am afraid none. Or in mathematics? Turning to Polyneus. "Now, just see there a proof of my argument. Can any man look more like wisdom, or less like happiness? This comes of diagrams and ethics. My young Corinthian, take warning. I wish we could fix you to a diagram," said Leontium. "The graces forfend. And why should you wish it? Think you it would make me wiser? Let Polyneus be judge, if I am not wiser than he. I admire the different prescriptions that are given by different doctors. The wife of the good Pythagorean recommended me a distaff." "Well," said Hermachus, "that might do equally. Pray, why don't you take one yourself?" "I, you see, am busy with philosophy. And so am I, with laughing at it. Ah, my sage brother, every man thinks that perfection, that he is himself, that the only knowledge that he possesses, and that the only pleasure that he pursues. Trust me, there are as many ways of living as there are men, and one is no more fit to lead another, than a bird to lead a fish, or a fish a quadruped. You would make a strange world, were you the queen of it," said Hermachus, laughing. "Just as strange, and no stranger, than it is at present. For why? I should take it as I found it, and leave it as I found it. 'Tis your philosophers, who would rub and twist, and plague and doctor it, and fret your souls out, to bring all its heterogeneous parts, fools, wits, knaves, simpletons, grave, gay, light, heavy, long-faced, and short-faced, black, white, brown, straight and crooked, tall, short, thin and fat, to fit together, and patiently reflect each other, like the acorns of an oak, or the modest wives and helpless daughters of the good citizens of Athens, 'Tis you, I say, who would make a strange world, were you kings of it, you who would shorten and lengthen, clip, pull, and carve men's minds to fit your systems, as the tyrant did men's bodies to fit his bed. I grant there's some truth, my girl, in thy nonsense, said the master. And I grant that there is not a philosopher in Athens, who would have granted as much, save thyself. You will find my young hero, turning to Theon, that my father philosophizes more sense, that is, less absurdity, than any man since the 7 sages, nay, even than the 7 sages philosophized themselves. He only lacks to be a perfectly wise man to burn, said the master, his books of philosophy, and to sing a tune to thy lyre. No, it shall do to let me sing a tune to it myself. She bounded from the couch and the room, and returned in a moment, with the instrument in her hand. Fear not, she said, nodding to the sage, as she lightly swept the chords, I shall not woo my own lover, but your mistress. Come, goddess. Come. Not in thy power, with gait and garb austere, and threatening brows severe, like stern Olympus in the judgment hour, but come with looks the heart assuring. Come with smiling eyes alluring. Moving soft to Lydian measures, girt with graces, loves, and pleasures. Bound with Basili's zone. Come, virtue, come. In joyous stone we bid thee welcome to our hearth, for well we know that thou alone canst give the purest bliss of earth. No thanks, no thanks. I shall take my own reward, and stealing behind Epicurus, she threw her white arms around his neck, and laid her cheek on his lips. Then rising, good dreams be with you, and waving round her hand, and throwing a smile on Theon, vanished in an instant. The youth saw and heard no more, but sat as in a dream, until the party divided. Have a care, whispered the master, as he followed him into the vestibule. Cupid is a knavish god, he can pierce the hearts of others, and hold a shield before his own.